Chapter 38. Act 1. Tonight was the night. Tonight we would vote. Tonight we would decide what we wanted for the rest of eternity. I hated it. I hated being forced to choose between Lucian and Enish. I hated that our parents wouldn't just appoint one of them to be our gatekeeper. They knew better than we did who'd be best at the job. Why were they putting the burden of decision on us? As I walked down the hallway to the evening lounge, I looked out longingly toward the garden. Less than a week ago, I'd sat on a garden bench eating apple puffs with Lucian. I'd been so excited about the idea of an inheritance test. I'd been so naive. I'd thought the inheritance test would be easy and exciting. Instead, it would be a complicated mess of memory veils, biochemicals, confusion, and loneliness. Was it worth it? Would the good of mortality outweigh the bad? Could I trust one of my brothers to guide me safely through it? Tonight, I would have to decide. I pulled open one of the heavy oak doors into the evening lounge. 9 chairs had been arranged in a circle so we could easily see each other as we counseled. All the chairs were the same, with no clear seating hierarchy. Mom and Dad were seated side by side. Enish was on Dad's right. Lucian was on Mom's left. Lucian smiled at me as I entered and gestured to the empty seat next to him. "Hey, Princess," he greeted as I sat down. "Are you excited for our grand debate?" "Sure." I flashed a weak smile. Excited wasn't the word I would use. Uncomfortable, agitated, unhappy, any of those would be a better fit. Tonight, I would have to pick one of my brothers over the other. How would that affect my relationships with them? I stole a furtive glance at Enish. He was engaged in conversation with Izzy, or at least he was excellent at feigning interest, while Izzy prattled on about the various virtues of buck-toothed rodents. That kid had the weirdest interests. Dorothea sat next to Izzy, and to my surprise, she didn't have her nose in a book. Instead, she smiled slyly as Jadith whispered conspiratorially into her ear. Strange, those two never had much in common. Yet here they were, actually giggling over something together. One of the lounge doors opened, and Marcus stepped into the room. Jadith and Dorothea glanced up at him and immediately burst into a fresh round of giggles. Marcus glared at them and marched to the final empty seat between me and Jadith. He made a great show of scooting his chair closer to me and further from his sister. "I feel like I'm missing something," I said as he settled next to me. "It's nothing," Marcus muttered, staring at the ground and crossing his arms. I looked at my favorite classmate sympathetically. I wanted to ask him what Jadith had done, but I didn't want to pry. Lucian put his hand on my knee to reclaim my attention. I turned to him, but before he could say anything, Mom cleared her throat. She gave a pointed stare at Jadith and Dorothea. The two immediately fell silent. I wondered if Mom sent them a mental chastisement through their links. When Mom was certain she had everyone's attention, she gave us one of her warmest smiles. "Today is the day," she announced brightly. "Today you will decide your future. You're on the cusp of a grand adventure. Should you decide to undertake this journey, you'll gain a physical body and experience the rich emotions of mortality. You'll learn to seek, to strive, to struggle, and to succeed. You'll discover new truths about yourselves and find a deeper level of love and happiness. But this journey is not without its sacrifices." Mom continued in a more somber tone. "Accepting this adventure means leaving the comfort and security of this kingdom. It means entering a new world filled with unknown danger and trial. It won't be easy." "Mortality is difficult," Dad added, seamlessly taking Mom's hand off. "We do not expect you to be perfect. We know you will make mistakes along the way." Dad looked around at us lovingly, as if he was already forgiving us for our inevitable failures. "That is why we are providing a gatekeeper for you. Your gatekeeper will show you the way back when you stumble.
He will provide a safety net for you when you fall. Both Enishkawandash and Lucian have volunteered to be your gatekeeper."
Dad continued, as if any of us could have forgotten the drama of the past few days.
"The decision is in your hands. Here is how the night will go. Lucian and Enishkawandash will each have a few minutes to explain why they desire the role. Then the 5 of you who are not in the running will each have a turn to tell us your choice and explain your decision."
What? My mind seized in pained panic. I thought we'd have an anonymous ballot or at least close our eyes while we raised our hands. But this? Now we'd have to look into the eyes of one sibling and explain why we were voting for the other. Why? Lucian, Enishkawandash, which of you would like to go first? Mom smiled at her sons in turn.
"After you,"
Lucian invited with a grand sweeping gesture toward Enish.
"After all, that seems to be my lot in life,"
he muttered in an undertone only I could hear. I shifted uncomfortably in my chair. Enish nodded and rose to his feet. He took a moment to gather his thoughts. Then he straightened his shoulders and smiled at us.
3 nights ago, we sat in this room, waiting to hear a grand announcement. On that day, we were told it was time for our inheritance test. And what did we do? We shouted for joy.
As he spoke, Enish made sure to move his gaze around the room so he could have a moment of eye contact with each sibling.
"Think of the way you felt in that moment,"
he prompted us.
"What about that announcement made you so joyous? Was it because you are ready to progress, to enter adulthood? Was it because you want the freedom to become your own person with your own life, outside the restraints and expectations of this kingdom? Was it because you want to experience all that life has to offer? Was it because you want to achieve your full potential?"
Enish gave us a few seconds to think before continuing.
"Our parents know what will bring us true joy. They have walked life's paths before us, and they have seen where each decision leads. That is why, with their infinite knowledge and love, they have created this perfect plan for us. If we follow their plan, we will find the joy we so desire. But, in order for their plan to work, 3 key elements are required: choices, consequences, and compassion. Now, we are no strangers to making choices."
Here, Enish gave a small finger point. The gesture was so familiar. It was the same one Dad made when he was stating something everyone already knew. I smiled at the similarity between father and son.
"Every day we choose how to spend our free time,"
Enish continued.
"We choose which class electives to take and with whom to be friends. But this test opens a whole new world of choices. To freely make those choices, we need to have a degree of separation from our parents. We need to discover for ourselves what we value and who we want to be. The purpose of this test isn't to mold us into mindless, obedient servants."
Enish opened his arms imploringly.
"The purpose is to provide a way for us to grow into experienced, dependable heirs. We need to experience making difficult choices if we hope to govern our own kingdoms one day. But with the freedom to choose comes the risk of making the wrong choice. How will we know whether our choice was good or bad?"
Enish paused for dramatic effect.
"By its consequences. Some would have you believe consequences aren't necessary."
Even now, Enish wouldn't call out Lucian by name.
"These people advocate that every choice is equally valid and that no one should be held accountable for their actions. They desire all consequences to be removed. But where is the justice in that?"
Enish gave a small shake of his head.
"Where is the learning? Where is the growth? Imagine someone wronged you.
Enish invited us after a pause.
Imagine they stole from you or lied about you. Without consequences, they would never be held accountable for their misdeeds. Justice would never be served. The perpetrators would never learn to better their behavior, and you would never receive restitution. Is that the kind of world in which you want to live? No.
Anish answered himself with another shake of his head.
That is why consequences are a vital part of our parents' plan. Consequences can be difficult to bear, though, especially if they're a result of a good-intentioned mistake. That is why compassion is the final crucial element of our parents' plan. Mistakes are an inevitable part of mortality. During the test, we'll be subjected to new hungers, emotions, and desires we cannot yet fully comprehend. We will be tempted by a chorus of conflicting choices. Some of those choices will lead to negative consequences, whether through our own poor choices, the poor choices of others, or simply through the natural consequences of living in a mortal world. We will suffer pain, sadness, and heartbreak in mortality. Our parents understand this.
Anish shifted to a lighter, more hopeful tone.
That's why we're having this discussion. That's why we're voting for a gatekeeper. If our mortal world was a perfect place full of perfect people, there would be no need for a gatekeeper. We would breeze through our test and come out the other side unchanged, undeveloped, and unsatisfied. We need challenges to learn and grow.
Anish declared, gesturing pointedly with his right hand.
We need to struggle with indecision. We need to make difficult decisions so we can learn from their consequences. But we also need compassion. We need a gatekeeper to compassionately guide us through the minefield of mortality and to pick us up when we fail.
Anish looked around our circle with an earnest, heartfelt expression.
I deeply love every person in this room,
he said gently.
I consider it my greatest honor to be your older brother. I've watched as each of you joined our family, and my heart has grown with each addition. I want the best for each of you,
he promised, reaching out to us.
I want you to become the best people you can be. I want you to feel the joy of knowing you've reached your full potential.
Anish once more straightened his shoulders and rose to his full height.
That is why I am offering myself as your gatekeeper. That is why I support our parents' plan to the fullest. I know their plan is the path to true happiness, and I promise you.
His voice became choked. He paused to gather his emotions before retrying.
I promise you, I will be with you, loving you every single step of that path. Thank you.
Anish sat back down. Izzy immediately snuggled into him. Anish wrapped his arm around our youngest brother's shoulder and looked to our parents.
Thank you, Anish Gawandash,
Dad said with proud affection.
You presented the plan admirably. It's clear you have a deep understanding of the gatekeeper's role.
Dad turned left toward his second son.
Lucian, the floor is yours,
he invited.
Yes, well done, Anish, well done.
Lucian rose to his feet, giving Anish a slow clap.
What a stirring oration.
Lucian turned his back to our parents to address the rest of us.
Too bad it was full of empty vagueness.
His eyes caught Jadith's, and they shared a smug smile.
Choices, consequences, and compassion.
My best friend mused.
How neatly alliterative. You must have been so proud of yourself when you thought of it, Anish. It sounds like a snappy title for some deep philosophical essay.
Lucian's eyes, which had been alight with wry cynicism, suddenly hardened with steely determination.
But this discussion is not philosophical. This vote has real, dramatic ramifications for each of us. Anish spoke of the value of choices.
Lucian paced in front of our parents as he spoke.
There is no doubt having choices is good. I know I enjoy having the freedom to choose how I'll spend my time or whether I should eat eclairs or apple puffs for dessert."
He tossed a special smile in my direction.
"You're all smart, well-educated people," Lucian flattered as he paced. "You have good judgment, and you're excellent at making decisions. I'm sure that in a fair, just world, you would ace your inheritance test."
Lucian abruptly stopped pacing to lock eyes with us.
"Sadly, the plan Enish endorses is anything but fair and just."
My friend's voice became sharp and slow with suppressed anger.
"Let me paint a picture for you." Lucian resumed his pacing. "Imagine standing in front of two identical doors. One of these doors leads to riches, power, and eternal happiness. The other leads to exile, abandonment, and eternal suffering. It's pretty obvious which door you'd want to open, right?"
Lucian gave a small shrug that expressed,
"I know this is a dumb question, but bear with me. Unfortunately, you don't know which door is which because you've had a memory veil placed on you."
Lucian shook his head in disgust.
"So, what would you do?"
Lucian gave us a moment to consider before declaring,
"That is the kind of choice Enish is proposing. That is the kind of mortality he offers. Not a life of clear consequences, but a life of confusion, uncertainty, and regret. When I am your gatekeeper, I will spare you from making such impossible decisions."
Lucian pledged,
"I will ensure the right doors are always open, so you never have to wonder. I will ensure the road to happiness is smooth and well marked. Mortality doesn't have to require suffering or indecision."
Lucian spread his arms in a wide, welcoming gesture.
"Mortality should be fun and easy. You should be able to enjoy all the pleasures of having a physical body without having to worry about the welfare of your eternal soul. Let me take that responsibility off your shoulders. Look around you,"
Lucian implored.
"This is your family. These are the people who have been with you for your entire childhood. We have laughed together, cried together, and grown together. I love being part of this family."
Lucian pressed his hand to his heart.
"But if you vote for Enish, we will never be together like this again."
Lucian's deep, soulful eyes locked onto mine before moving around the circle to Marcus, then Jadith, then Dorothea, and finally to Izzy.
"Under the guise of free will, Enish refuses to guarantee your safe return."
Lucian's voice rose with accusation.
"Look around you. Which seats will be empty when the test is over? Which family members will be lost forever?"
Lucian was positively fuming by this point.
"Because I can promise you, if Enish is gatekeeper, some of us will not return. Is that what you want for yourselves, for our family?"
Lucian paused to collect himself. Then he extended a hand down to us with a benevolent smile.
"Vote for me, and I will guarantee your safe return, regardless of any mistakes you might choose."
Lucian's voice was now calm, yet powerful.
"Vote for me, and I swear to you, we will all sit in this room again, fully clothed in the glory of our success. Vote for me, and you will be saved."
Lucian sat down with a smug smile, clearly pleased with his own performance. He reached his hand toward mine. I accepted his hand and gave it a validating squeeze. What else could I do?
"Thank you, Lucian."
Dad nodded at his second son.
"You are indeed an impassioned orator."
He looked to Mom, who nodded solemnly.
"Very well,"
Dad continued with an uncharacteristically grave expression.
"Now that we've heard from both candidates, it's time to cast your votes. Isidore, we'll begin with you and work our way around the circle."
Last. I would be last. Was that a good thing or a bad thing? I didn't know. Do I have to stand? Izzy asked.
If you would, sweetheart, Mom invited. It makes it easier to hear.
Okay. Izzy nervously rose to his feet. So, yeah, this is awkward.
Izzy wrung his hands and chewed his lip.
What Lucian said was really scary. I don't want anyone to get lost in mortality. I mean, I love you guys, and that would be really sad. But I don't think that would actually happen. I trust Enish, and I trust Mom and Dad. If they say this plan is safe, I believe them.
Izzy spent another moment nervously shuffling.
I want to have a mortal body. I want to feel what it's like to have blood and nerves and hormones and all that stuff. I want to explore and taste all the different foods and make real friends who don't just want to be friends with me because I live in the palace.
Poor Izzy. Being a royal ward had its perks, but fitting in wasn't one of them.
So, yeah, the memory veil is scary, but it's also kinda cool. It's like starting a brand new video game. You get to be whoever you want to be, and there's a whole new world to explore. And I think Enish will be a great strategy guide. Or, gatekeeper. Same thing, right? But, yeah, I vote for him.
Izzy turned to our parents.
Is that all I'm supposed to say?
Yes, thank you, sweetheart. Mom smiled. You did well. You can sit down now. Izzy gratefully took his seat, looking extremely relieved to be done. Enish pulled Izzy into a brotherly side hug and shoulder pat. Lucian gave me a small shrug coupled with an eye roll. He wasn't worried or surprised. Everyone knew Izzy would vote for Enish. Dorothea, though...
I choose Enish Gawandash as gatekeeper,
Dorothea announced succinctly the moment she rose to her feet. Her confident abruptness took everyone but our parents by surprise.
Can you walk us through your decision, please, Dorothea?
Dad asked before she could sit back down. Dorothea pursed her lips.
The words experiment and experience have the same Latin root. They both come from the word experier, which means to gain knowledge through repeated trials. Lucian has stated his intention to remove all trials from our test. By so doing, he would remove the means to gain knowledge. I desire to gain as much knowledge as possible. Therefore, it is expedient for me to cast my lot with Enish.
She immediately dropped into her seat and stared resolutely at the wall behind our parents. Lucian was slightly frowning now. He could still win, but he'd need all 3 remaining votes. Jadith was also frowning at Dorothea. She had a disappointed, betrayed expression on her face. Had Jadith tried to influence Dorothea's vote? Was that why they'd been so chummy earlier? Dorothea continued to stare straight ahead to avoid eye contact with anyone.
Thank you, Dorothea.
Dad smiled encouragingly at his youngest daughter.
I know you came to your decision with a great deal of research and logic.
He turned to his oldest daughter.
Jadith,
he invited.
The floor is yours.
Jadith rose slowly and elegantly from her chair. She smiled beatifically down at us, her eyes lingering for a moment on both Lucian and Enish.
Thank you, Dad, she said graciously. And thank you, Mom. Thank you both for providing us with this great opportunity to grow.
Jadith turned her gaze from our parents to us siblings.
This is indeed a difficult decision to make. I, too, look forward to the experiences that await us in mortality, and I, too, desire the chance to make a name for myself outside of this kingdom. But this decision has been pulling us apart, she added with a sad expression. Look at us. She gestured around the circle. Why are we here, having to choose between our brothers? Surely some compromise can be made. Why does it have to be one or the other? Don't we all want to experience mortality? Don't we all want to grow? The way I see it, Enish is advocating for carrying out our parents' plan exactly the way they presented it. Lucian, on the other hand, is advocating for a modified plan that guarantees a safer outcome.
Jadith turned to face Enish directly.
You're a great guy, Enish, she said earnestly. And my problem isn't with you. It's with the format of the test. She turned to address our parents directly. 3 days ago, Lucian asked you a simple question. That question was, will everyone who enters mortality find the gate home? And your answer was... Jadith left the sentence hanging expectantly. No, Mom replied, repeating her answer from 3 nights before. Everyone will have access to the gate, but no one will be forced to follow the gatekeeper to its location. Oof, Jadith said with a pained expression. There's that victim blaming described as free will again. It's not a good look, Mom. If you tell someone which road to take, then put a memory veil on them, you can't blame them for taking the wrong road. Jadith turned to face the rest of us. This test is too hard. It's deliberately designed to make people fail. Why are you voting against your own best self-interests? Anish isn't determined to get us home. He's only determined to do whatever Mom and Dad ask him to do. And they've admitted they don't care whether or not we make it home. I looked to our parents to see if they would refute this obviously false statement, but they didn't. Why were they staying silent? There's been a lot of talk tonight about love and family, Jadith continued. But answer me this. Who has promised to ensure we're reunited as a family? Who has promised to make sure the test is fair so we have a fighting chance? It's not Anish. Jadith answered her own question. It certainly isn't our parents. And that is why I will now officially cast my vote for Lucian. Jadith gave Lucian a wink and said, Guide us well, Lush, before returning to her seat. Lucian gave her a wry salute. Our parents held hands across the armrests of their chairs.
Thank you for your fervent opinion, Jadith,
Dad said.
Might we just add a quick thought to yours? I hope you will all have the future opportunity to be parents. You will then experience the painfully exquisite paradox of parental love. That means respecting your child's need for autonomy, but desiring more than anything, their safety.
Love means giving the other person the freedom to be who they truly are, Mom added. We love you enough to let you choose. Her warm smile, though slightly sad, was filled with enough love to lighten my entire soul. On that note, Mom continued, It's your turn to choose, Marcus. Marcus glanced at me of all people before unhappily rising to his feet.
Before I explain my choice, can we all agree we do want to have an inheritance test?
He glanced around the room for consensus.
From what I understand, the issue has never been whether or not to have a test. The issue is what form the test takes and how the test is administered.
I glanced surreptitiously at Lucian. I knew if he had his way, we'd get our inheritance without a test. But Lucian was staring attentively at Marcus without a hint of disagreement in his face.
I'm as excited to take this test as the rest of you,
Marcus continued.
I want to explore and learn and expand my understanding. But I don't like the idea of having a gatekeeper, whether it be Anish or Lucian or Mom or anyone. For me, it all comes down to self-sufficiency.
Marcus clasped his hands together.
I understand the need for trials and difficult choices during our test. I also understand that with the limitations of a physical body, it will be impossible for us to make the right decisions every time. And I definitely understand the need for compassion. But can't there be compassion without a gatekeeper? Can't there be a way for us to fix our own mistakes?
Unlike his older sister, Marcus seemed uncomfortable in his dissent against our parents' plan. He held his hands protectively in front of him. His eyes flicked nervously between the floor and the wall.
I have 2 main problems with the whole gatekeeper thing,
Marcus continued.
First, I don't like putting my eternal well-being in someone else's hands. Don't forget the gatekeeper has to live a perfect life before he can open a gateway back home. Well, I don't even know how that's possible. How do we know for sure Anish will succeed? I mean, yeah, he's good at everything.
Marcus rushed on with a small shrug.
But so are most of the people in this room. Why do we assume we'll all fail except for him? I know you mentioned the gatekeeper won't be fully mortal and that he'll have extra support through his link.
Marcus turned to address our parents.
So why can't we all have that? Instead of making a test that's so difficult we need a gatekeeper to save us, why can't we each have the tools we need to save ourselves? Why do we have to put our trust in a middleman?
Marcus gained more confidence in his position as he continued. He stood straighter and looked us in the eyes as he spoke.
My second problem with the gatekeeper is feeling eternally indebted. If the plan does work perfectly and the gatekeeper manages to guide us home, then we'll never be able to repay him for his service. I'm already impossibly indebted to you for taking in me and Jadith,
he said directly to our parents.
I don't want to spend eternity feeling like I owe an impossible debt to my brother.
Well, I agreed with him on this point. I wondered where Marcus was going with this. Was he going to abstain from voting? Was that even allowed?
So?
Marcus squared his shoulders and turned to our oldest brother.
Anish, I respect you as a person, and I love you as a brother. But I don't want you as a savior. I don't want anyone as my savior.
Anish gave Marcus a slight nod of understanding. Marcus then turned to Lucian with a carefully composed expression. The two of them had never been the greatest of friends.
Lucian, Marcus said with resignation, I don't like your plan. I think it's unfeasible. It's not possible to have both free will and universal salvation. You know that. You know you're trying to sell us a product you can't provide.
Marcus paused to see Lucian's reaction. Lucian remained cool and unfazed by the accusation. His only response was a small, tight-lipped smile. Marcus sighed and turned back to our parents.
But the impossibility of Lucian's plan is the exact reason why I'm going to vote for it. I know it's not a viable plan, but by voting for it, I hope we'll be able to find a compromise between the two plans that lets us safely retain our free will without having to depend on a gatekeeper to get us home. So, yes, I very reluctantly vote for Lucian.
Marcus stood in silence for a moment while we all tried to process his words. Then he looked at me and mumbled,
"Sorry,"
as he took his seat. Why was he apologizing to me? Shouldn't he be apologizing to Anish or Lucian or our parents? Then it hit me. The vote was tied. 2 votes for Anish and 2 votes for Lucian. I'd hoped my vote wouldn't matter. I'd hoped that by going last, the decision would be made before it got to me. But now, my vote was suddenly the only one that mattered.
Almira,
Mom gazed at me with her piercing eyes.
It's down to you.